Starting off with a classic, the Coburg-Kohari curse. One of the German branches of Queen Victoria's family were the Coburgs, who were famously cursed with more than hemophilia. Hungarian noble Antoinette de Kohari married into the family in 1815, and the bride's father persuaded the emperor to sign Antoinette the legal status of a man, allowing her to inherit his estates and whole fortune that wouldn't have gone to anyone in the male line. A monk named Brother Amerskius was one of the super distant male relatives outraged at losing potential inheritance, so the brat cursed her. The hardest hit was the royal house of Portugal and the Kohari branch of the Saxon-Coburg family. Her son Ferdinand's wife dies in labor. Then Maria's successor Pedro lost his wife as well. Pedro then passes away, and a week before one of his brothers had died, then a week after Ferdinand, his other brother dies. Within 8 years, 5 members of this family are dead. Even Pedro's successor is plagued with misfortune, as are his children and Pedro's children. This whole family is killed in coups and inside jobs and tragic illness, right up to Prince Leopold in 1916, who pushes his lover to the edge, causing both of their deaths. The talk of the tabloids, Grimaldi witch curse. There are a couple different versions of the reason for the curse. Prince Rainier I abducted a Flemish woman who escaped, or she was a witch being burned at the stake by him. Whoever it was, they got revenge with the curse. Never will a Grimaldi find happiness in marriage. Prince Rainier III's father was gay and ended an unhappy marriage after 10 years to announce it. And while Grace Kelly and the prince were sold to the public as a great love story, the truth was he cheated on her a whole bunch before she passed in the 1982 car crash. Her daughter Stephanie, who survived the incident, endured several failed relationships, and Grace's other daughter Caroline had a tumultuous love life. With a divorce, her second husband who died in a speedboat accident, and her third husband, a prince, she now divorced. Perhaps taking the curse seriously, the current reigning Prince Albert III put off marriage for a long time, instead having a bunch of illegitimate children with various women before marrying Charlene Wittstock in 2011. It was super bumpy, seeing as she found out about some love children, called it off, and then he persuaded her not to. She could be seen crying throughout all of her wedding footage. The secret love child. Writer Mariel Daniels, then a 16-year-old working on a biography of the Belgian Queen Paola in 1999, casually discovered, the then reigning King Albert II fathered an illegitimate daughter during an affair that lasted 18 years. Casual stuff, you know. She was born Delphine Bowles in 1968, daughter of Baroness Sybil Delcilius Longchamps, and from an early age, Delphine did know who her biological father was. Albert, who she nicknamed Papillon, was a constant presence in her childhood, even taking her on holiday. Though apparently an open secret in royal circles and the reason for marital troubles between the king and the queen, the story only became publicly known in 1999. Delphine had been speaking with Albert her whole life up to this point, who then reassured her that it would just blow over. But then in 2001 his tone changed. He told Delphine he wasn't her father and broke off their contact, leaving her in a state of shock. She eventually launched a legal action to secure recognition in 2012, but it dragged on for years as Albert continued to deny paternity. But when he stepped down from the Belgian throne in 2013, he lost legal immunity, so off to court they went. And it was only in 2020, after court-mandated DNA tests proved irrefutably that the former monarch was the father of artist Delphine Bowles, Albert was finally forced to acknowledge he'd fathered a child out of wedlock 51 years prior. And when it comes to siblings, you know what a big deal it is to say, "I call dibs"? William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England, had 4 sons. One died before him, but William split his kingdom between his remaining. Robert, who was given Normandy, and William, who was given the whole dang throne of England. That left the youngest Henry just cold hard cash. William consoled Henry with the prediction that he would one day amount to much more than either of his siblings, who proceeded to make his life hell, stealing from him and locking him away routinely. Then, in 1100, William, the older brother, dies in a hunting accident. Henry didn't even bring the body back. I'm not kidding, he got on his horse and he went around and galloped to secure the royal treasury Winchester before rushing to London, where he was crowned on the 5th of August 1100. He was king before Robert, returning in triumph from the First Crusade, even knew the crown should have been his. Robert attempted to take England for himself, but Henry beat him back, and then after a few years took Normandy too. Robert was captured and Henry kept him in prison for the rest of his life. Henry ruled for 35 years in total and lost his only heir to the sinking of the White Ship, causing a royal succession civil war called the Anarchy. It's one we all know and we can probably sing. Rah rah Rasputin warned them. The Romanovs were the last royal family ruling of the Russian Empire, and they had ruled the country for 400 years. Obviously by the 20th century it's about time for some change, and the Romanov dynasty was facing some serious challenges. I mean, we got World War I raging, famine and war-stoked aggression groups, and the Romanovs' only son Alexei was the sole heir and had hemophilia, which was a huge issue then. But Rasputin was able to keep the boy from dying on 5 separate occasions. Needless to say, from the perspective of the Romanovs, Rasputin was the only thing keeping the dynasty and empire alive single-handedly. Rasputin, however, issued a prophecy early in his life, before he even met the Romanovs. A vision that if someone killed him, their entire family would die with him at the hands of the Russian people. He made sure to be a broken record about this too. Well, his warning failed to discourage Felix Yusupov, who poisoned, jabbed, pew-pewed, and strangled, then drowned Raspy. And Felix was the cousin of the Tsar Nicholas of Romanov dynasty. Just like that, Rasputin's death was the end of the Romanovs, as just a few months later, the Russian Revolution swept the monarchy out of power, executing all of them and making Rasputin's prophecy come true. A lesson in theft: the strawberry tiara. Why theft? Because a lot of these stolen jewels are the cursed ones, and it's not clear where the curse of the Hesse-Darmstadt comes from, but the court jeweler points to the strawberry tiara as the culprit. The tiara was designed by Prince Albert, husband of Britain's Queen Victoria, for their daughter Princess Alice to wear on her wedding day. But before he could see her walk down the aisle in it, Albert died of typhoid fever at 42. Alice wore the tiara at her wedding and brought it to Hesse, where exactly 17 years later to the day of her father dying of the disease, Alice died of typhoid, but not before watching one of her daughters suffer and die of it as well. Alice, like Victoria, carried the gene for hemophilia, and through her daughters, Alice passed it on to the Spanish and royal families with tragic results. Perhaps none of that was down to a curse on the strawberry tiara, but then in 1937, 5 members of the Hesse-Ducal family were flying in a relative's wedding when the plane crashed while they were trying to make an emergency landing. Everyone on board was killed, and the strawberry tiara was recovered from the wreckage in one piece.
Number 4. Waste removal. This one is kind of a broad stroke, but hear me out. There's no plumbing, no waste removal, and people kind of just go wherever they want. A lot of that unhygienic waste is kind of just laying about. However, the people of Egypt also had the advantage of the Nile River, which means they use that bad boy for everything: transport, irrigation, a water source, and of course, a bathroom. Which, in case you didn't know, your source of water and irrigation should be 2 separate. They shouldn't go together. That's not good. This is a good explanation for the plagues of Egypt, besides the sin. Bad sinners, no sinning. As years of that kind of negligent waste management are liable to make any pharaoh sick. Don't mix your water with the poo. Don't do that. That's bad. Don't do that. Number 3. Sunscreen. This should come as no secret to anyone out there, but with my rosy cheeks and fair complexion, I would not do very well in the suns of ancient Egypt. Honestly, I don't know how Luke Skywalker lived on Tatooine with those twin suns. Without a little copper tone action, you know what I'm saying? The Egyptians had an answer to that problem, however. Not the whole living on Tatooine part, that just kinda sucks no matter what. Blue milk is weird. They had a makeshift sunscreen using rice bran extracts and a few other ingredients that were meant to help protect against the sun's rays. How effective was it really? Not sure, cause the only stuff I'm willing to test out is the real stuff. And if I get burnt, then I start peeling. And then somebody has to rub aloe vera all over me. Be right back, I'm gonna get some sun.
They've got so little to talk about, it makes more sense to sit in silence. British royalty's list of permissible conversations has about as much flavor and depth as a boiled chicken breast, which the whole family kinda already looks like they eat for 3 meals a day anyways. But more on the British family and their notoriously spiceless food later. According to the former butler of Prince Charles named Grant Harold, the British royal family isn't supposed to discuss intercourse, religion, politics, or money, which are all incredibly relevant things for monarchs to be talking about. Literally all 4 of those things correlate with every facet of their title, job's existence, but okay prudes. It's against royal etiquette to discuss these subjects between royals, commoners and royals, or even for commoners who are just at a royal event. Prince Charles was apparently a regular breaker of this rule, as proven in 2015 when The Guardian won the 10-year legal press for the release of the so-called Black Spider letters. The Queen herself has made many indirect references to political battles, and naturally the media aired out Meghan Markle when she once whispered her approval on Ireland's vote to legalize the Big A for women. Instead, Grant said it's advised to discuss travel and the weather only. This has got to be the most boring family on earth, guys. I couldn't survive 2 minutes in that house. When you're royal, you have the pick of the litter, but not without consequence. Much like Queen Elizabeth in the UK, the Emperor of Japan, currently Naruhito, who took the throne in 2019 following the abdication of his father, Akihito, does not play an active role in politics for the country, more so a mouthpiece. However, they still follow some of the most wildly uptight rules imaginable, and one of them is how female members of the Japanese royal family are forbidden from marrying commoners. You can marry who you love, absolutely, but baby girl, should it be a commoner, you have to forfeit the princess status for them. Once known as Princess Nori, now Sayako Kuroda, she took this step in 2005 when she married her older brother's longtime school friend. Princess Mako became engaged to Kamarua, former classmate, in 2017 and addressed the press stating, "From the time I was a child, I was aware upon marrying I would give up my position as a member of the imperial household. Given that situation, I tried to assist the emperor and do whatever I could to fulfill my role as a member in the imperial household, while also valuing my own life." The two were wed in 2021 and Mako now works in New York City. Naturally, there are double standards. The same sacrifice was not required of Prince Akishino, the brother of Sayako, and when he married outside of the Japanese aristocracy. His wife is the daughter of a university professor. Ashiko's wife wasn't the first commoner woman to marry into the Japanese royal family, but she was the first from a middle-class background and was subsequently harassed and dragged through the mud.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the Wanli Emperor. The 13th emperor of China's Ming Dynasty, Wanli had many relations with women. He is said to have had 2 official consorts and a number of concubines, but one of these ladies was clearly his favorite, Lady Zheng. She had 2 sons, and one of them, Wanli, really wanted to be his successor. Unfortunately, this son was the 3rd of his children, so his ministers and those around him wouldn't allow it. They believed he wasn't the proper heir. In the end, the first son of Wanli, who was born to consort Lady Wang, was declared the crown prince. This is when the emperor decided that since he didn't have his way, he was just gonna quit working. Prior to this entire dilemma, Wanli was looked upon as a great ruler. He worked hard and he handled the threats to the empire very quickly. This was all extremely contradictory to the final 20 years of his reign, where he apparently just started ignoring meetings and royal duties. This is why many historians actually place a lot of the blame for the downfall of the Ming Dynasty in 1644 to this sort of passive-aggressive protest. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Joan of Kent. Joan of Kent lived during the 14th century in England, and she was known as being one of the most beautiful women in all of England. She was said to be quite loving, but it is also said that she had quite a whirlwind and controversial love life. So basically, Joan was only 12 when she had her first marriage. I know it's horrifying now, but this was the practice at the time, and she married a knight named Tom Holland. But when Tom went off to war, Joan was approached by another man, the son of the Earl of Salisbury, who asked for her hand in marriage. Despite the whole Tom situation, she said yes, because at the time there was no way for anyone to know who would be coming back from battle, and she just assumed that Tom had died. It was of course quite the shock to everyone when Tom ended up returning, very much alive, to find out about all of this. A legal battle followed which Tom ended up winning, and him and Joan went on to raise 4 children. After his passing, however, Joan would go on to marry again, to the dismay of many people, but this time she married the son of King Edward III, and she went on to become the first Princess of Wales.
This time, a curse waits 10 generations. Nepal had become a sovereign nation in the 1700s, ruled by Prithvi Narayan Shah, and there are 2 stories for how he became cursed. Both begin with him coming across a supposed hermit. Either the hermit offers the king food, which he refuses, or the king offers the hermit a bowl of curd, which he eats and then tries to exorcist vomit on the king, who obviously moves out of the line of fire. Either way, the hermit is actually revealed to be the god Goraknath, and he was pissed. So, King Shah is told his line would fall after 10 generations. Horrifically, on June 1st, 2001, the then King Nepal Biryendra Bir Bikram Shah Dev and most of his family were together in their palace. For reasons that are still not clear, the Prince Dipendra, the king's son and heir, entered the room loaded with weapons and killed 9 people, including his father, mother, brother, and sister. Dipendra then tried to take his own life and ended up in a coma for 2 days, during which, because of how monarchies work, he was officially Nepal's king by default. Dipendra then dies and the crown is passed to Birendra's brother before Nepal ended its monarchy in 2008. It lasted exactly 10 generations. How a curse of twins led to Zulu defeat? Maybe. The Zulu people had a belief that twins were cursed, and Makabi and her sister Mamana were allowed to live because their father, King Jama, who loved his precious daughters too much, he just couldn't fulfill that obligation. His subjects were not impressed and proceeded to blame everything bad that happened to the Zulu on the curse the sisters carried by being alive. They even blamed them when their own mother died, which was bad news for the clan, seeing as she hadn't provided a male heir before her soul's departure. Makabe continued to buck tradition. When her father died, she became regent for the young half-brother that she had, even though no woman had ever held that position before. The Zulu called her a bloodthirsty despot, but she did step down voluntarily when her brother was old enough. 20 years later, his son, Shaka Zulu, Mayabaki's nephew, would ascend to the throne. Shaka was both a very successful king and a very, very, very violent person. He had a thing for killing his own people by the thousands for no reason. So, Mugabe, she arranged for his brothers to kill him. As he died, legend said he cursed the Zulu. "You will never rule this land. It will be ruled by the sparrows who will fly across the sea and build their nests high on the cliffs. It's said this curse brought the oppressive white invaders that overthrew the next king, and the curse of Makbake led to the curse of Shaka, which led to the defeat of the Zulu. And speaking of dysfunction, it's the crappy Castiles. Born fourth in line to the throne of her parents, Ferdinand and Isabella, Juana was married off to Philip the Handsome of Burgundy at age 16. When a series of sibling deaths made her the heir apparent to Isabella's throne, her husband confined her, using her mother's death in an attempt to press his claim over Ferdinand's for the Castilian throne. Juana already experienced mental illness before this point, and the loss of her mother had been an aggravating factor. Being imprisoned? Yeah, that does not help. After Philip's death in 1506, already known to fly into jealous rages over her husband's mistresses, even reportedly going so far as to attack at least one. Honestly, same energy here, girl. Juana refused to part with her deceased husband's remains for a disturbingly long time and was said to have opened her husband's casket to embrace and kiss him. Juana's confinement continued for another decade after her father's regency until he died. Unfortunately, Juana's husband Philip had spread rumors about her madness when he was still alive, and her behavior after his death didn't help, so her son Charles, who became the Holy Roman Emperor, eventually took over for Juana as regent and then monarch. From then on, it was him who kept her imprisoned and created a fictional world to keep her isolated. No one actually knows if she was crazy or just experienced depression and lived in an era where men undermined her intelligence and constantly threw distressing BS her way. Next up is two sets of dirty duos. The extreme punishment of a perceived disgraced royal woman stretches back at bare minimum to, dawn of time. Yeah, we haven't had a lick of peace since men started making rules, to say the least. In 1314, the high-spirited Marguerite and Blanche of Burgundy, daughters-in-law to King Philip of France, were accused of having scandalous liaisons with two brothers, Philippe and Gautier d'Aulnay. According to historian Alison Weir, the notorious Queen Isabella of England was the gossip girl who outed her pretty careless sister-in-law's out-of-wedlock romps, which took place primarily in the Parisian tower called Tour de Nesle. Blanche and Marguerite both admitted to their adultery because it was that or death, so I mean, their erasure from public life was swift. They had their heads shaved and they were tossed in the rich white girl dungeon, which isn't that bad. Meanwhile, this is the one time in Western history where the men actually faced a pretty harsh adultery consequence, something usually found in every other area of the world. The brothers had their elephant trunks and boys chopped off while they were awake and alive, and then their nether regions were thrown to dogs, which they had to watch the dogs eat before being brutally executed. Marguerite, technically Queen of France upon her husband's ascension to throne, died in 1315, and Blanche languished in captivity, whereabouts barely known, and died in 1326.
Number 10. Snake Eyes. Well, not exactly snake eyes, but after extended use of belladonna drops in the eyes, you would probably wish that a snake bit you in the eyes. Belladonna is poisonous. It's a no-cal zone, red flag. But yet it was still used by Egyptian royalty. Basically, the drops of poison would dilate your pupils, and that would be considered to be beautiful. For some reason, I guess. Okay. Extended use of the drops had terrible side effects for the user, blindness being one of them. You gotta remember, folks in this time have no social security, and the best doctors can do for you is tell you to go take a bath in crocodile dung. And to pray to the gods for more, I guess. Sure, okay. So to avoid that tragedy, go for the natural look and avoid the eye drops. You'll thank me later. Number 9. More eye stuff. Thought I was done with the eye stuff? Well, guess again, amigo. I ain't done yet. I've got lots more to say about that. Okay, maybe a little. Eyeshadow and eye color. Some ladies today would say no special outfit is complete without it, and honestly, I have to agree, ladies. Sometimes y'all do some stuff with your eyes that makes me say, damn, you look good. Damn, you look good. However, some ladies might be cautious to slap some color on their face if they knew the origins of the product. As for the royalty of Egypt, eye makeup was in. Seemed to be a trend. However, they weren't so cautious of where their makeup got its origins. Egyptian eye glitter had two key ingredients: applicable powder and bugs. Yeah. You know the super colorful ones that are like really big and you wouldn't want to be around? Yeah, those. Beetles, scarabs, and pretty much anything you could find. They would then crush them into a heavenly pulp and smear it all over their royal faces. I have issues with spiders and wasps as it is. I have no interest in wearing them whatsoever. I actually hate wasps. That's just even just crushing up a bunch of... and just, oh, this is good. Oh, I love this. This is the best. Yeah, no, don't do that.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Sophia Dorothea, daughter of the Duke of Brunswick-Luneburg. She was betrothed to her first cousin, George. Now, history says that George wasn't the most attractive man with the nickname Pig Snout, but George was in quite a position where he was potentially the heir to 2 thrones, so of course the Duke agreed to hand his daughter over in hopes of her securing a crown. Princess Sophia obviously did not like this and apparently fainted when she heard of the betrothal in 1682. The marriage did go through, but things went downhill quite quickly and turned very violent. Flash forward to the time when Count von Königsmarck arrived from Sweden, and suddenly Sophia had a new interest. Not long after his arrival, the pair were having quite the affair that wasn't exactly as discreet as you might have assumed. The pair made a plan to run away together and make a new life far, far away from Pig Snout. Unfortunately, however, the night before the pair were supposed to run off, the Count just disappeared. There are plenty of theories of what might have happened to the Count, including a jealous former lover and of course George. In the end, the rumors were swirling and George was super mad about it, so he divorced Sophia, took the kids and sent her to be imprisoned in a small castle on the lake. In the end, George went on to become King George I of England and he left Sophia behind. In our number 5 spot today, we have Marie Antoinette. In 1783, an artist painted a portrait of Marie Antoinette. This would go on to become one of the most scandalous royal portraits of all time because of the dress that she was wearing. The dress, a gaulle, wasn't the regular restrictive court dress and instead was something that the queen would normally wear as she strolled around the grounds of Versailles privately. This comfortable dress, however, was a little bit too scandalous for the public at the time because it resembles a form of undergarment worn to protect expensive clothing. Basically, to the public, it looked like the queen had just been painted in her underwear. Not only were people upset that she didn't upkeep this sort of mystique of luxury and royalty, but the fabric the gown was made from was also quite controversial. The cotton dress was heavily associated with the slave trade and was looked on as a British fabric, which was horrible for a French queen to be wearing. The painting was quickly taken down, but the damage was already done. Within the next decade, the queen would meet her demise at the hands of the guillotine.
And speaking of, number 8 will be about marriage to the ex-youth. If you can put together what I mean by that, y'all know this was a tabloid nightmare. Claus von Amsberg wasn't exactly the spouse people had in mind for the then Princess future Queen Beatrix of Netherlands. After all, when Claus was younger, he was a member of the Schmittler Youth and later German army. This was already a problem for plenty of reasons, but the Dutch capital had lost pretty much all of its Jewish population to the horrific oppression and the now finished war. Their romance sparked a storm of protest in the Netherlands as a result. Claus was a low-ranking West German diplomat when he first met Beatrix, the then-crowned princess, on a Swiss ski slope during a winter holiday in February of 1965. They kept things on the DL until she warmed her parents up to the idea of meeting him, and to the surprise of many, Queen Juliana and her husband, Prince Bernhard, approved the match. Maybe it was because Bernhard himself was German-born, or their love was really that swaying, but I'd say part of it was the man himself. Claus initially was regarded as stiff and stern, and he worked really hard to shake off the habit he'd learned in his youth, and be vulnerable, showing a playful side to the public. He flouted royal protocol by removing a necktie during his speech and gave rides on the back of his bike during his wife's birthday. He also made himself favorable by mastering the Dutch language and learning to speak it with very little trace of a German accent. And he did give the Netherlands their first male heir in nearly a century. Well, he didn't produce it, Beatrix did, he just helped, he's just Ken. The two remained married until his death in 2002. Now here is a name we all know well, but not for this reason. Number 7 is Wed in Absentia. Marie Antoinette and Louis were married before they ever even met. On April 19, 1770 in Vienna, Marie's older brother, Archduke Ferdinand, was the stand-in for her soon-to-be groom. Ferdinand literally stood at the altar as Mary walked down. They exchanged their vows, exchanged the rings, jury's out on if the kiss part happened, but it was actually 2 days later that Marie left the country for the real deal wedding and groom. If you want to learn more about being wedded in absentia, how that works and where it comes from, check out my recent vid, The Top 10 Messed Up Marriage Traditions in Ancient Rome. It's on May 16th of 1770 that she and Louis are finally properly married at Versailles, a day after meeting for the first time in person. As was the custom, the groom's grandfather accompanied the newlyweds to the bedchamber. He blessed their bed, kissed them both, left them to produce a royal heir. However, this teenage couple was hiding a dark secret behind bedroom doors. Not only did they not have a baby, but they didn't even try. The couple didn't consummate their marriage for 7 years, and it cost caused a massive scandal. How could they not produce an heir? It was her job as a queen, and Louis needed to maintain the royal lineage. Historians have speculated why the couple didn't consummate their marriage all that time. So did the public in the 1700s, but the reasons are usually dumb witchcraft stuff. Nowadays it's assumed maybe Louis had a condition that affected his abilities, or maybe she experienced too much pain when they were trying. Honest answer? I think it's because they were young, the two probably weren't ready, and puberty probably hadn't done its thing and given them the drive. Either way, scandal ensued and the story ultimately ends with heads rolling. Because it doesn't count as a crime if he did it to himself. Most of the information we have about Crown Prince Saido, born in 1735, comes from the wife's autobiography, Queen Haejeon, written in 1805. She recalled what happened as his disease progressed. Prince Saido's mental health further deteriorated by 1757, following the death of the queen and his adopted grandmother. To release his emotions and frustrations, Saido began to beat the court eunuchs and staff. When that wasn't enough, he began to kill. Here's what his wife's account was of that. The first person he killed was Kim Hachia, the eunuch who happened to be on duty that day. The prince came in with the severed head and displayed it to the ladies in waiting. The bloody head, the first I ever saw, was simply a horrifying sight. As if he had to kill to release his rage, the prince harmed many ladies in waiting. I suffered so for this. His illness seeped deeper and deeper. Now that he was killing people, our quarters became a house of horrors, in which no one could be certain that they would not fall victim next. Eventually, Prince Saido kills his favorite mistress and threatens his own sister. In 1762, realizing the disgusting conduct would ruin the Korean family, his mother appealed to his father and they had to eliminate their own child. Since tradition dictated that his wife, Lady Hyejong, would have to die as well as their son if they punished Prince Saido, the king came up with a bizarre solution to safeguard the daughter-in-law and heir. On a sweltering day in July, the king forced Saido to step into a rice chest that would then be locked. So that way, technically, the disgraced prince had caused his own death. He died 8 days later. And I can't even give you a funny title for this one because it's just a lot. This is the crop top king. King Maha of Thailand, crowned in 2019, is a philandering train wreck hot mess. When his third wife dumped him, he tossed her parents in prison for 2.5 years for royal defamation. His earlier 2 marriages were equally rocky. He allegedly fathered 5 children with a mistress during his first marriage to his cousin, and then married said mistress. Later he dumped her and made her flee the country. When he was crowned prince, taking a page from Caligula, he appointed his pet poodle Fufu to the royal air chief marshal, then held 4 days of Buddhist funeral rites when the poodle died in 2015. He even took the pooch to a 2007 reception hosted by His Honor the US Ambassador Ralph Skip Boyce. Then there is the 70-year-old king's fondness for wearing crop tops and temporary tats. Check out this sick pic at an airport in Munich, strutting his stuff with a rolled up tank top, sagging jeans, and fake tattoos with the poodle in tow. Call this king a queen cause he is serving! Belly bearing bets have become the garment of choice for many young Thai pro-democracy protesters in rallies in recent years. They are looking to limit the powers of the king who has become the richest monarch in the world, partly by amassing personal control of an estimated 43 billion in royal assets in 2018 that were historically overseen by an agency meant to manage the money for the benefit of the Thai people. His response for this was to ban crop tops. In July 2019, 2 months after the king married his 4th wife, his longtime mistress Siniat was made a royal consort in hopes of getting her to shut up and accept that he'd never marry her and make her queen. 2 months later, because this didn't work, he strips her of her titles, tosses her in jail until she can learn to behave, and after 10 months, she's released back to his custody for about 2,000 explicit images of them to get leaked to the entirety of the Thai community in a cyber attack, and everyone sees these guys. They're explicit. Obviously, I could keep talking about this guy and his gross scandals forever. There's no shortage of them, but instead, we'll stare at these airport photos again because man, what the hell am I seeing here?
Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have Isabella of France. Back in 1313, Isabella, the daughter of King Philip IV of France, made a gift for a group of noblewomen that her brothers were marrying. She gifted the 3 women these embroidered purses, and as it turns out, these gifts would soon lead to their demise. Basically, the following year after giving these gifts, Isabella spotted 2 of these purses in the possession of a pair of knights. You can probably already see where this is going, but of course Isabella was suspicious of this now, so she passed on the information to her father. From here, he had people watch the wives of his sons as a sort of investigation. Soon, 2 of the wives were found guilty of adultery with the knights, and it was discovered that an old guard tower acted as their secret meeting place. The women were placed into prison for the rest of their lives, and the men met gruesome fates that ensured they paid for their disloyalty. This had lasting repercussions, however, because with their wives in prison, the king's sons now didn't produce any male heirs before they passed away, and thus the 100 Years' War was born when the son of Isabella, Edward III of England, attempted to claim the French throne. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Prince of Brunei. Brunei's prince, Jeffrey Bolkiah, is the brother to the Sultan, and a few years ago he found himself in quite the scandal. Basically, in 1997, Shannon Marketic accused the prince and the Sultan of flying her and many others to Brunei under false pretenses. In this scandal, everyone escaped any kind of charges due to diplomatic immunity. Then we moved to 2000, where the Sultan himself sued his brother for apparently embezzling $14.8 million from the Brunei Investment Agency, which is in charge of things like their oil revenues. While he denies the charges, he agreed to hand over a number of his personal belongings to the government in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution and being allowed to stay at his residence. This was quite messy for the outwardly luxurious prince, but since then, it doesn't seem as though any major scandals have come to light, and the Sultan remains one of the last absolute monarchs in the world.
Number 4. Party time. British royals are people of high esteem, morals, and cut from a higher quality of cloth. So when members of the royal family are seen partying too hard, well, it's a bad look. Prince George, Duke of Kent, was one such royal. He became known for spending his evenings in the best hotels and ballrooms that money could buy, even sometimes wandering into venues that were a tad tawdry even by today's standards. What's more interesting than that is the prince living the life of a frat boy is that his promiscuous relationship with not only just women, but men as well. Add in substance abuse issues that would make Charlie Sheen blush, and you've got yourself one wild prince. Yet again, there's some private letters that seem to support such wild accusations. Unfortunately, he passed away in a plane crash that is shrouded in mystery, and the royal family is suspected of having a hand. Foreshadowing much?
At number 3, the milkman's son. By far the most scandalous royal relationship of modern times was without a doubt Prince Charles and Princess Diana's marriage. We all know how messy their relationship was with the love triangle, the affairs, and Diana's confessions of how tough it was to be married to Charles. But one of the other pretty juicy secret scandals that surrounded the couple was the speculation that the couple's youngest son, Prince Harry, wasn't even Prince Charles's biological kid. In a tell-all interview with Princess Diana in 1995, she admitted to having had a 5-year-long affair with a military man named James Hewitt. After Diana's passing, people started speculating that perhaps this James character was actually Harry's biological dad. I mean, when you take a side-by-side look at James and Harry, their resemblance is pretty uncanny. James denied all allegations, and the royal family did the same, but this still remains one of those royal secrets that I'm sure everyone believes but just won't admit. Kiss the hand, which will be our first point. Believe it or not, kissing the hand or feet of a royal is a tradition that goes back to ancient times. Nowadays, the most remaining monarchies have tossed that tradition aside because, well, hygiene, it's annoying, people don't respect boundaries, and as a kid, nobody has ever liked that. Moroccan royalty, however, has hung on to the tradition. King Mohammed is a big old fan of this old-timely custom and has ensured it is legally mandated. Come across a royal on accident? Hand kiss. Having a meeting? Hand kiss. Why talk to the hand when you can give it a little smoochy smooch? Anyways, they did recently have to ban it for the duration of the pandemic to protect the king, obviously, but as of late 2022, the law is back. Hilariously, his son, like all little kids, hates the whole kissing thing. In 2016, a video went viral of Prince Moulay Hassan whipping his hand away and refusing to have a kiss as he went down a line of visiting dignitaries greeting them. His father found humor in it and widely joked the hand kissing tradition will likely be retired with the prince. Imagine being so good at your job it becomes law that you're locked into it for life. The Bureau of Astronomy for lifers. In ancient China, the emperor was known as the son of heaven, and society functioned off the concept that the emperor was God appointed. Naturally, the imperial government would regularly reinforce the idea of the emperor's divine right by using stories and symbolism that indicated heaven's pleasure at the emperor's leadership. The stories and symbolism came from astronomy, with the study equated to divining the future of the empire and its rulers. As of the Qin dynasty, their government had special departments specifically for celestial phenomena, drawing up calendars, producing advice and evidence. When Zhu Yozong, the first emperor of the Ming dynasty, came to power, he was not only so impressed with the astronomers and their predictions, but also the ability to see past the normal eye. Why, hell, he decided the rules were needed to control the Imperial Bureau of Astronomy. These men were practically prophetic, and this skill invaluable. What if someone stole it? Or one of them wanted to quit and waste their brains on being a farmer instead? No, Zoo needed to make sure that under wraps and locked up for only the Son of Heaven's use. His rule bound all officials in the Bureau to their posts, forbidding them from transferring to other departments, leaving for another position, or learning another position. And because it felt like it was such a supernatural skill, surely it must be in the lineage. So their descendants were also bound to astronomy and forbidden from engaging in other fields of work.
Number 8. Comrade Cousin? King George V and Tsar Nicholas II were rulers of vast empires in the early 20th century. You'd think the similarities between these two monarchs end there, but in reality, these two royal men were much closer than the public thought. Georgie and Nikki were first cousins. That's right, first cousins. Even though their respected empires were culturally different and separated by hundreds of miles, the two men were immediate family. Looking at images of the royals together doesn't require a DNA test to understand that they're related. They look identical and could easily be mistaken for twins. Unfortunately for Nicholas, when the Russian Revolution was in full swing, the Romanov family went into isolation after Nicholas abdicated his throne. While there were attempts to thwart the coup. Nikki's cousin wasn't the best aid. Just goes to show you that sometimes you can't rely on a guy who looks exactly like you because royalty has pretty messed up bloodlines.
At number 7, killer date. What is the worst date that you've ever been on? What kinds of weird people have you met through your dating history? I'm sure there are some pretty wild and crazy stories out there, but I'm guessing that very few of them would even come close to the insane dating story from Princess Beatrice and how she literally dated a killer. In 2006, when Princess Beatrice was 17 years old, she got into a relationship with an American playboy named Paolo Luzzo. Paolo was an arguably shady guy, judging by the fact that he was arrested on a manslaughter charge before getting with Beatrice. Paolo was accused of ending the life of 19-year-old Jonathan Duchalier after beating the guy to death. Yeah, what a catch, right? Shockingly, Paolo's charges were reduced to a less severe charge, and he still got to date a princess after all of this. He even broke his probation to go on a trip to the French Alps with Princess Beatrice. How he finessed life so hard, I have no idea, but either way, their relationship only lasted a short amount of time. I can't say it's a good look for a member of the royal family to be seen with someone with such a dark past.
Imagine pointing at a fish and going, "Hey, look, a fish," and its response is, "That is Lord Fish" to you. Quite the case with carp, of all creature, literally the dirtiest little bottom feeders there are. They eat just about anything, thus earning their meme status as a garbage fish. However, carp, like koi, can be fortunate and seen as good luck. In fact, talking about carp the way I just did could get you in massive trouble during the Tang Dynasty because carp has the same pronunciation as the Tang Emperor's last name, Li. According to the Miscellanea of Yuyang, which is a record of legends, folk customs, and herbal remedies in the Tang Dynasty, carp had to be referred to as Lord Red Carp to show respect to the imperial family. Also, those who happen to catch carp should relieve the fish immediately. It's not acceptable to eat them, and those who sell them will be flogged 60 times. However, like all legal provisions, this law was only as good as its enforcement, and judging by the amount of Tang poets who wrote about catching and eating carp without any record of punishment, seems like this law was very loose. Emperor Renzong of the Yuan Dynasty had a similar idea as his Tang predecessors. The Yuan Dynasty historian Yang Yu recorded in historical notes that during the Renzong reign, people in the capital were not allowed to hold chickens upside down. Offenders would be convicted, probably because the emperor's zodiac sign was a chicken. Now, it's China's shorty selection system in the Forbidden City. Inside the Forbidden City, most women were maids and servants, but there were the notorious concubines. Their task was to bear children to the emperor, as many as he could father, because that's what he was focusing on when walking into a harem of women who couldn't say no to him and were also the baddest biddies the empire had to offer. Anyways, women were selected for the court as early as the Jin Dynasty, and the aesthetic selection criteria did range from emperor to emperor. According to law, all young unmarried women went through the selection process. Only girls who were married or had a certified physical disability or physical deformity were exempt. Whenever selection time rolled around, the Board of Revenue sent notices to the officials in the capital and the provincial garrisons to enlist the help of the clan heads. The banner officials then submitted a list of all available available females to the commander's headquarters, and they set the date. During the Qing dynasty, girls were brought on the appointed day to the Shenwu gate of the Forbidden City for inspection. They'd be accompanied by their parents, nearest relatives, together with their clan heads or local officials. Social background was actually no barrier, and many emperors chose concubines from the general public. The empress was the one exception. She had to be for a high-ranking official. Less than 100 candidates would be selected to spend the nights with women who specialize in training and managing maids. Candidates' bodies were inspected for infections, body hair, body odor. Think of that beginning scene in Mulan, as stereotypical as that is to say. They advanced through 2 more levels of concubine boot camp, weeding out the weak, America's Next Top Model style, and finally, the selected few would take their lives as easy-baked baby ovens. Womp womp. Next. Imagine someone wants to make sure you like the food, so they find a way to measure your enjoyment. Literally measure it. Like, get on a scale, big boy, it's time for your weigh-in. Absolutely crazy. So listen to this. According to a 2018 Grazia Daily article with the representative of British Windsor family, before and after Christmas dinner, everyone gets weighed. Ho ho ho, jolly occasion. The weird tradition apparently dates back to King Edward VII's reign in the early 1900s. His Majesty was apparently concerned about the people's health and whether or not they're eating well enough on Christmas. So, each person attending this dinner is required to get weighed on a pair of antique scales both before and after eating. If they gain in weight, it signals they truly enjoyed themselves at the table and the king did his job. Oh yeah, and you are obligated to know how much you weigh too before and after, so don't think you can ceiling stare your way through this one. The tradition was depicted in a scene in the 2021 film Spencer, in which Princess Diana, played by Kristen Stewart, understandably tweaks a little and expresses her distaste over the entire debacle. Pop off as usual, Princess D. Some other fun royal Christmas activities are the guests are expected to enter the room in order of seniority, whatever the hell that means, and wear paper hats even though the queen doesn't have to wear one. And last but not least, rules are meant to be broken. Like all monarchies, Spain does have its royal protocols, and they regulate the normal stuff, how you talk, walk, dress, the elegance in which you hold your regal frame. Spain has these royal protocols alright, and we know that because Queen Letizia is constantly making headlines for breaking them flagrantly and with a smirk ever since her husband was crowned. In 2014, royal watchers gasped when she wore a little black dress with a short skirt that was see-through all the way up to her mid-thigh. Conservative royals frowned at when she wore a sleeveless dress to a formal dinner. She wears pants and shorts and sweatpants. She forgoes traditional shawls and enormous hair cones for Brandy Melville and cute ponytails with highlights. Stylistically, the previously divorced commoner and formal journalist, which I have to add because you know that was hella drama when she was made queen, is basically the opposite of her mother-in-law, who's now Spain's former queen, Sofia. Letizia probably takes extra delight in flaunting their differences since the two hate each other with a passion and have gotten in shouting matches in public.
Number 10. King Edward VIII. Directly after his father died in 1936, King Edward VIII took the throne, right? That's pretty normal. But the tides quickly turned when, less than a year later, he renounced his position. Now, this was of course a huge scandal right off the bat. This is not something that's taken lightly in the royal family. Turns out the woman responsible for stealing his heart was that of Wallis Simpson, America's socialite who had already been divorced once before and was at this point working through her second divorce. So you can only imagine how everybody reacted at that point, right? Oh, how dare she? His proposal to Simpson, of course, caused social and political backlash. The Church of England wasn't so chill with Edward marrying someone who had already been divorced. Yeah, they're not really okay with that. So Edward was forced to abdicate. Yeah, he had to, right, for love. Edward and Simpson then tied the knot in 1937, and they stayed together until Edward's death much later in 1972. Sliding into royal DMs right off the hop. Okay, we're in for a treat. Number 9, dark predictions. Of course, in recent years, the royal family has seen a change that many didn't really expect. When Harry and Meghan chose to renounce their royalty status, speculation began that this could be the beginning of the end for the monarchy. People only fueled their fire with questions, and also, somebody may have called it. Yeah, Nostradamus, he may have predicted this entire event. One of his predictions literally reads, "At the end of the war, the great powers change. Near the coast are born 3 beautiful children. They will ruin the town when they come of age, they will change the kingdom, and they will not see it grow anymore." Now, Harry is only one of 2 children, so I'm not sure if the, quote was talking about him and his siblings, or if it has more to do so with some other royal family members, but either way, there's some people who take Nostradamus' words very, very seriously out there, so I had to include it. Maybe there's something there, I don't know. Maybe there's something we haven't quite breaking down yet. That's why we need National Treasure 3. You know, maybe this is the plot.
In our number 4 spot today, we have Atahualpa and Huascar. These two were the two sons of the Inca king, but when he passed away in 1527, the kingdom was left to the sons, but their joint rule did not turn out so well. By 1529, war had broken out and things were going downhill. What would later become known as the War of the Two Brothers saw many horrors, and apparently one brother at one point made a drinking cup out of the skull of one of the other brother's generals. The civil war that the two started would definitely speed up the downfall of the civilization, but things met an even crazier end. Just as Atahualpa seemed close to declaring his victory in 1532, Francisco Pizarro's Spanish conquistadors showed up and captured him to hold him for ransom. During this time, he was still able to get out a message to execute his brother. In the end, while he outlived his brother, it wouldn't be by much because he was then executed by the Spanish in 1533. In our number 3 spot today, we have Richard III. There are many questions surrounding this king's rise to power because, well, it seems sketchy at best. When King Edward IV died in 1483, he left behind 2 sons. The eldest of the two, Edward V, was too young to rule on his own, so the sons were to be looked after and to be advised by Richard III, the late king's brother. Well, something strange happened after just 68 days when the sons were sent to the Tower of London and then were never heard from again. Of course, this meant that Richard III needed to take over the throne. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to the sons, as they have never been found. Was this just a tragic coincidence, or is Richard III a usurper? Richard met his fate in battle just 2 years later and took these secrets with him to the grave.
Number 6, the Great Irish Famine. The Great Irish Famine took out many, many people. Back in 1845, potato crop that a lot of the Irish population relied on were suddenly no longer available. See, a group of microorganisms wiped them out, and in result, around 1 million folks died or had to leave. Now, it was draconian law and British ruling at this point that made the exported food hard to reach people. That's where things stopped. This famine led to Irish independence, of course, and anti-union movements, and the show Victoria pulled back 0 punches in 2017, where an episode showed the true happenings behind the Great Irish Famine and the role that Queen Victoria played in coming to the aid of her then subjects. It was the death of at least 1 million people. This was a very dark 7 years in Irish history. Historian Christine Keneally spoke out and says, quote, "There is no evidence that she had any real compassion for the Irish people in any way." Yikes. That's a historian saying that. That's how you know. Number 5, Meghan Markle, solo strut. Okay, back in May 2018, we all set our alarms, we woke up early, and we all watched the royal wedding, right? We sipped our tea in our pajamas and we pretended like we were there, right? Just watching, along with the other billions of people online. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, his new Duchess. At the historic wedding, Thomas Markle was just a no-show. Yeah, Meghan just walked down that aisle by herself in front of a billion people, watching at home or streaming it, and it was thought at the time that this was because of Thomas's health. See, right before the wedding, Thomas suffered a heart attack, right? Just days before, so of course nobody was upset. It was almost expected for him not to show up. But cut to a year later, we began talking again. Thomas and the Duchess are now not close, it seems. Thomas even spoke out against his own daughter at one point. There was a huge scandal where Meghan even spoke to Oprah, like Oprah and that big tell-all, and Meghan actually said to her father, "If you tell me the truth about working with paparazzi, we can help." And he wasn't able to do that, and for me, has really resonated, especially now as a mother, end quote. So yeah, they're not talking, I guess, anymore, which more than fair. If my dad was working with the paparazzi, showing them private letters, I'd be a little pissed too. There's no way though, the guy can't even unlock his email, let alone sending one? No way.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the rules of the road. Okay, this like rule or tradition or law, I guess, is probably one of the craziest things I've ever heard, but I guess it's been around for quite a while and I just had no idea. As it turns out, the monarch is the only person in the UK who is allowed to drive without a legal license or even license plates. Like, that's insane. I didn't expect the king to have to take a driver's test like everyone else, but just having a rule that allows them, if they chose to drive without any idea how? It's pretty bizarre. The good news is though, which makes this rule make a lot more sense, is that of course, rather than driving himself, King Charles' chauffeur will be much more responsible for most of the driving for the king. Let's just hope the chauffeur has their driver's license. I'm not gonna lie, there's this like silly photo of the queen, and every time I think about like the monarch driving without a license, I just think of this like little photo. She's got like a little silly grin on her face. She looks mischievous. And that's what I like to think, her just driving with no license. In our number 3 spot today, we have the armed forces. This is a tradition or system that comes into play when a new monarch comes into power. So last year this happened with the king after the passing of the queen. It is definitely one of the most intimidating parts of his new role, and this is that King Charles now becomes the head of the armed forces. This means that it is his responsibility, and he is the only person who can declare when the country is at war and when the war is over. Of course, he won't be doing this entirely alone. He needs to follow the advice and guidance of the government. The perhaps good news is that the new king has held quite close ties to the armed forces throughout his life, even spending time in the Royal Navy and taking flying instruction from the Royal Air Force during his second year at Cambridge University. Of course, the hope is that he won't have to be in a position to make these difficult decisions, but when or if he's faced with them, we can hope he makes the proper decisions for the country.
Number 2. Vegas getaway. Nice, roll those dice. It's one thing to party like a rock star, but to party like a prince? What does that even mean? I gotta keep this Prince Harry train going because, well, now I'm mad at him, but there's even more photos from history that show what was really going down in the royal family, you know? His priorities, dare I say. After that party incident, just 7 years later, scandalous photos emerged from Harry's Las Vegas trip. Yeah, I had a little boys' night, it seems. It turns out what happens in Vegas may just leak online for your entire family to see, and your grandmother. That's probably not a great time. These scandalous pics were taken during a strip pool game. Lovely, we like that. Make sure you call the right pocket while you're not wearing any. The scandal actually prompted St. James Palace to contact the Press Complaints Commission before the snaps even made their way to British tabloids. Yeah, they knew right off the bat they were fucked. They're like, can we call them? Can we send a pigeon? What's the fastest? And finally, number 1, Boy Jones and other attempts. Okay, being the queen and all in history, a security team is always needed, obviously. And during her reign, specifically Queen Victoria, there were multiple attempts to harm the young queen. First attack was in 1840. It was an 18-year-old man named Edward Oxford, and he fired towards the Queen's carriage. When Edward was accused of high treason, of course, afterwards, he was actually found not guilty due to, you guessed it, insanity. A couple years later, in 1842, it happened again. This time, 2 men fired at her, both also missed. In 1849, her carriage was attacked by William Hamilton. In 1850, as the carriage was passing the gates of Buckingham Palace, Robert Pate, a retired soldier, might I add, ran up and hit her with his cane. Victoria was okay, luckily, but of course she was shook. Then these incidents kept occurring again in 1842, 1849, and 1872. Attempt after attempt after attempt. But then things got a little worse and, dare I say, a little bit more weird. If you haven't heard of Boy Jones or anything that happened there, I saved it for last because it's so horribly creepy. A teenager stalked the Queen back in 1838 until 1841, and his name was Edward Jones. Edward Boy Jones. This guy somehow managed to break into Buckingham Palace more than once, right? Before Assassin's Creed came out, no idea how we thought of this. Guy just knows a route in, and he would break in and would hide under the Queen's sofa. That was his go-to spot. Or he would sometimes just sit on her throne. And one of the worst things ever, sometimes he would go through her drawers. He would go through the Queen's drawers. That's so gross. What? Like that's gross.
All right. It's everywhere right now, so obviously covering it first. Number 10, how a blind date leads to being 1 in 1,000. It's been controversy since day one with Meghan and Harry, not because they did anything wrong per se, not at least at first, more so the usual sensualization drama that has to occur whenever a prince chooses a cool Hollywood gal to be his biddy. As you'll learn in this video, this was not the first time this has happened. The couple met on a blind date in 2016, and the relationship was confirmed in November of that year, immediately initiating waves of hatred and bigotry onto the couple for Meghan's ancestry, career, and how she even breathed. Really anything the media could latch onto. This onslaught is what promoted the couple to step back from the royal family in 2020, instead splitting time between the UK and North America and finding their own financial endeavors. They also made the rare royal move to take legal action against paparazzi for the excessive negative tabloid attention, part of which was exasperated by Meghan's dad sharing all her personal business with literally anyone who'll listen. That's part of the reason Meghan only had one guest of her own at their wedding that contained thousands, her mother. Since their marriage, all the scandal has revolved around the Oprah interview, podcasts, novels, and broadcast interviews. But now, as of this week, it's coming from suspicions that Harry and Meghan are taking a break. This follows Meghan's $20 million Spotify agreement being canceled and causing apparent financial plight for two people that are already worth millions of dollars. Evidently, living all your lives out loud in this fashion from day one of a relationship will halt its healthy progression. But a source close to them is saying that this time apart in different continents isn't a breakup, rather time apart couple needs. I want to follow that up with the very similar story of the American divorcee, number 9. Like the gravy and mash that the Brits oh so love, this is scandal ladled on to scandal. In the early 1930s, Wallace Simpson was married to Prince Edward, was in line to become the king. By 1934, rumors had already started about the two having an affair, something they insisted that until their dying days never occurred. Anyways, when King George dropped in January of 1936 and Edward is crowned, he calls up Wallace, who proceeds to immediately divorce her husband. This now made her a 2-time divorcee, something the Prime Minister at the time stressed to Edward as being a bad idea. At the time, divorce was frowned upon, and the thought of a monarch marrying a divorcee, unheard of. Joke's on him though, because by December the Prime Minister is invited to the palace for a dinner where he's told by the new king his plans to marry Wallace anyway and abdicate. The Prime Minister and Edward's mother, Queen Mary, respond pretty much the same. What is wrong with you? Edward's reign lasted 324 days before he abdicated to marry the woman he loved. The couple was married in France on June 3rd of 1937 and promptly shipped to the Bahamas by Edward's family. Why? Oh, well, because the real scandal with these two is that they were Yahtzee sympathizers during World War II, a time when their own country was fighting the Germans, the same Germans and dictator, hint hint, that they went and hung out with and encouraged. Yikes. If you want to learn more about royal blunderings like these, be sure to take a second now to subscribe to the
Number 2. Stepbro? Yeah, I know it's gross, but the truth of the matter is none of us would be here if it wasn't for a little inbreeding. Royals just tend to turn that dial up to 11. Back in ye olde times, bloodlines had to be maintained, and the only way to keep them pure was to marry cousins and have children. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip are both related to Queen Victoria, but the crazy bus doesn't stop here. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were first cousins, and they had 9 children together. This is a tradition that all royal families practice. Of course, marriage back then was more of a business decision or a political one. It's why certain distant cousins end up ruling different monarchies and empires. Sure, I get it. Why cross the street when you can cross the hall? But at some point, you gotta run out of cousins. Let's just be glad this practice is of the past and stays in the past.
At number 1, long lost family. The royal family is known for trying to make themselves look perfect in the eyes of the public. They are always trying to look poised and put together and without flaws, but this effort also comes with its dark side, and there's a dark royal secret that just shows the lengths that they have gone to make people think that they are all just perfect people of society. It turns out that the queen had secret cousins that very few people knew about. The royal family and everyone adjacent are very well-known people, so how did we not know about the queen's cousins? Well, that's because they were essentially shunned and shipped off elsewhere because of their mental states. Back in the 1940s, mental disabilities were not very understood and were often seen as embarrassing for the families of the people who had whatever disability. The royal family thought that these cousins, Nerissa and Catherine, were too embarrassing for the royal family to keep around, so they had them incarcerated in a mental institution and they remained there for the rest of their lives, cut off from the rest of the royal family. It is said that no members of the family ever came to visit them. Now that is not a way to treat family.
Number 8. King Henry II. While we're on the topic of him, could Nostradamus have actually predicted the death of King Henry II? Because if he did, that's pretty curious, I'd say. Never used the word curious in my life, but I'm like, you know what? That's curious. King Henry II was actually a personal acquaintance of the prophet himself. That'd be kind of cool, being friends with Nostradamus. I'd be like, hey, how does Game of Thrones end? Please. While at one point in history, Nostradamus was seen addressing King Henry II as the most invincible King Henry of France, unfortunately Henry proved to be quite vincible when he met his gruesome death, might I add, at age 40. Yeah, in the summer of 1559, not a great time. A terrible jousting accident went wrong and it left the king passing away shortly after from sepsis. This is a terrible story, but I have to explain because, you know, it's history and well, that's what we're here for. The jousting accident saw the king having splinters driven into his eye and then his skull as well by one of his young soldiers. And the Nostradamus quote reads, "The young lion will overcome the older one. It says he will pierce his eyes through a golden cage." Okay, already we're a little bit spooky. And that 2 wounds will ensure a cruel death. So I'm not saying he predicted it, I'm just saying kind of nailed it. Number 7, a fateful turn of events. Queen Victoria, her reign began back in 1837 and it lasted until the Queen's death in 1901. Now at just age 18, Alexandrina Victoria had to rise up to the throne. Had to, right? All these cases, it's like, yeah, they have to do this. She was born, of course, on May 24th, 1819, and Queen Victoria was actually 5th in line when she was born, nowhere near the throne. So right off the bat, it was actually highly unlikely that she would ever see the crown. But one by one, all of her family members began passing away fast. In 4 years, 3 of Victoria's cousins passed away, and then her father and her grandfather both died 1 week apart from one another. So on one hand, obviously it's sad, it's tragic, everyone's dealing with loss so fast. But on the other hand, by the time 1830 rolled around, Victoria was only 11 years old, and already she was next up to bat for the throne at 11. Imagine, that's like some ancient Egypt.
And speaking of age, how about the new religion in at number 4? At the beginning of Henry VIII's reign in 1509, the British crown showed no signs of wanting to leave Catholicism. Yet when Henry started pining for Anne Boleyn, who refused at first, unlike the other courtly women and her own sister, to put out no matter what he did, it drove the man crazy with desire, right to the point he made the unprecedented decision to straight up divorce his first wife so he could marry Anne. The first wife, Catherine of Aragon, had been passed down like a family heirloom to Henry when his older brother Arthur died. Henry wasn't the biggest fan and had already been denied an annulment in 1527, so in 1533, Henry just married Anne in secret. She was already pregnant with Elizabeth, and the ceremony took place in the middle of the night just before dawn at Whitehall. There was only 4 or 5 witnesses, mostly Henry's close friends, and then the marriage was kept under the strictest secrecy because Henry, of course, didn't have permission from the Pope to divorce, let alone remarry. When the Pope raises a fuss, Henry's reaction is to just casually declare himself the head of the Church of England and completely splinter the religion from Rome, thus starting a whole new branch of a religious faith. As if forcing an entire country to switch religions for your marriage wasn't controversial enough, he later beheaded his wife for reportedly cheating on him. Number 3 is kind of a cute story, the coupon dress. Though you wouldn't guess it by looking at the dress because honestly, it's the best royal wedding dress I've seen come out of British monarchy. But did you know, due to the post-war austerity measures, Princess Elizabeth had to use clothing ration coupons to buy her dress. Determined to get her dream dress despite the doom and gloom the empire was recovering from, Elizabeth, who was just a princess at the time, saved up clothing coupons in order to pay for the materials. She received an additional $200 as a gift from the government, and most iconically, brides-to-be all around England, excited about her upcoming nuptials, sent her hundreds of their own coupons. Overwhelmed, Elizabeth made sure to return these coupons to every single woman who sent one, especially given it was illegal for them to be given away in the first place. The dress was designed by Norman Hartnell, and what he created was certainly fit for a queen. Chinese silk, high neckline, tailored bodice, and a classic fit and flare silhouette. The ivory silk gown had a 13-foot-long train with the pattern installed by a Botticelli painting. The extra coupons, it said, went towards the extra materials needed to make it. It's incredible to think that the post-war restraint shown by the Queen in the last 1940s, less than a decade before her coronation. The scandalous nature of using coupons for a dress ironically was an afterthought, mostly pulled up once she became queen much later to try and besmear her for cheapness.
Number 6, the princess. The tragic loss of Princess Diana affected not only the UK but people around the globe. She was known for her courage and her willingness to help those in need, and had the nerve to speak her mind. Her shocking demise isn't met without controversy. In fact, it may be the biggest controversy of the royal family. There is some evidence that points in the direction that the royal family was behind her death. Diana had proclaimed to her guards that her car was having issues, and even stated in a private letter to her butler that she had some reasonable fear that her life was in danger. In a nutshell, the royal family disapproved of the princess's new lover, even though Charles had clearly been up to no good himself. So in order for Charles to remarry and stop the gutter storm and the tabloids that Diana was going to create, they maybe sort of organized the accident that did end her life. Well, good thing that's over, and after this, there won't be any more controversy for the family, right?
At number 5, sucking toes. The British royal family are considered celebrities. I mean, with the amount of time people spend obsessing about their every move, I'd say that they're 10 times more famous than the Kardashians. They don't need their own reality show for people to keep up with them. People just do it. With this obsession with the royals, obviously comes paparazzi trying to get the latest scoop on members of the family and what they do in their spare time, as well as who they're canoodling with. This was how Sarah Ferguson was exposed for seeing other men shortly after she and Prince Andrew separated. Sarah was photographed topless on a beach with a man named John Bryan, and it could have just been a juicy story by itself, but things got weird when pictures were published showing the man sucking on Sarah's toes. This again wasn't a good look for the royals, and the queen was pretty mad about the whole situation, but I'd like to look at the bright side of this. Think that this John Bryan guy had a pretty good time throughout all this. I mean, he got to suck royal toes and be published in the newspaper. Sounds like a pretty lit time for him.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Kensington system. Queen Victoria's reign began in 1837 and it lasted up until her death in 1901. She was just 18 years old when she found herself on the throne throne, and it was all by chance, as she was actually 5th in line when she was born. This is all stressful enough, but certainly one of the worst parts of her upbringing was being brought up under the Kensington system. This basically all started when her mother, Duchess Victoria of Kent, created this system in order to control her daughter, literally just isolated her away from all of her friends and even from other family members, and apparently this was done to keep her quote-unquote pure. The Duchess would monitor her every move, she would decide who she could see and who she could speak to, and Victoria only had 2 friends she could play with growing up, one being her half-sister and the other being her mother's attendant, Sir John Conroy. Victoria was even forced to share a room with her mother until she was queen. She couldn't even walk down the hall by herself. In the end, Victoria placed a lot of blame on John Conroy for manipulating her mother. She even called him the demon incarnate. In our number 9 spot today, we have the royal affairs. There have been many rumors over the years about the royal family and their extramarital affairs. Okay, I'm not saying it's a tradition, but it happens a lot, and I'm saying this goes way back. So far back that one of the first accusations of this within the royal family dates all the way back to Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. Since then, it has only continued with people such as Princess Margaret and Peter Townsend, Princess Anne and Commander Timothy Lawrence, and of course King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla, just to name a few. The latter of those definitely being the most famous, especially when the now king was confronted about it by his wife at the time, the beloved Princess Diana. Apparently, King Charles responded to the confrontation by saying, quote, "Well, I refuse to be the only Prince of Wales who never had a mistress." Maybe not the attitude to keep when you're speaking to your wife, who you're cheating on. I don't know. Guess I'm just not royal enough to get it.
Number 8. Sweet traps. When you're royalty of one of the most successful empires and civilizations in human history, it means you ain't gonna lift a finger. Less than any other celebrities do today, probably. So what to do with all that extra time in your hands instead of living like everyone else? Well, how about a picnic? That sounds nice, actually. Sounds great, right? Except when we bring out all of our favorite treats, the flies and bugs bother us, and we can't look beautiful if we're covered in bugs head to toe. How did the Egyptians fix this, you ask? Well, it's simple. Don't let the bugs bite you in the first place. Basically, you get one of your forced volunteers, maybe a couple actually, and you slather the poor devils in honey, till they look like your favorite pastry from Tim Hortons. Place said glazed serving away from the picnic, and now you can enjoy it in sunshine and peace. The screaming of being eaten alive by bugs might dampen the mood, so just wear earplugs, it's fine. You stay over there and just get eaten, it's fine, no problem. No problem. Number 7. Unhooded Sith. Circumcision is important in a lot of cultures of yesterday and today. Now at this channel, my job is to come out here every week and make you laugh. So to the men out there who still have their Jedi robes, imagine every day of your life you got sand in places that sand shouldn't be. Anakin Skywalker's worst nightmare, and honestly explains why he hates sand so much. But perhaps one of the reasons Egyptians used this hygiene service was to stop sand getting in their wiener's one-eyed bandit. There's no showers, nothing to really get it out once it's in there. That's no good. I guess you could take a dip in the Nile River, but there's too many crocodiles in there, and who has the time to jump in the Nile River when they're busy being forced to build large structures that will stand the test of time? So you better line up, fellas, or be cursed to feel like Anakin Skywalker for the rest of your life. The prequel one too, not the cool animated one, the one that whines a lot. That one. You don't want to be that one.
In our number 2 spot today, we have no touching. There is a rule that you just cannot touch a royal. I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons for this, mostly to do with security, but aside from a very lucky handshake, you really are supposed to keep your distance. I suppose it's because I live the life of a regular person, but I kind of feel like in some ways this might be a little sad. I feel like you might be lacking in so much connection with a ton of interesting people, and like some of the people that you meet, wouldn't you just be dying to hug them? You know, apparently this is part of the reason why the Queen always wore gloves. She of course shook a lot of hands while making her royal appearances, and the same will likely go for the new king. Maybe he'll take up gloves as a fashion accessory, just like his mother. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the church. So we talked about the armed forces, and King Charles won't only be the head of the armed forces, but he will also become the head of the church in England. Quite a jump from talking about war and being the one who makes those kinds of decisions to being the head of the church. church, where things hopefully are quite the opposite. This is a post that British monarchs have held since the church was founded by King Henry VIII in the 1500s, and it appears as though the tradition will carry on. In this role, it means that King Charles will be responsible for appointing archbishops and bishops to their role. The king will of course be advised in this role by the Prime Minister, and it is said that the king is religious in his own right and that he has already spoken about how his personal faith has informed his approach to leadership. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Bye.
Modern day monarchy wouldn't be complete without a tax fraud family. 2014, the dubbed philandering playboy king Juan Carlos of Spain found his popularity plummeting. His initial ascension to throne in 1975 had been wondrous, but now following reports of his messy affair and exuberantly lavish lifestyle in the midst of Spain's economic collapse, he abdicated the throne in favor of his son Felipe. His daughter Infanta Cristina stirs the pot, charged with tax fraud in 2014. Although she was acquitted in 2017, she was stripped of her title and left Spain for Switzerland. But it was her husband's turn, I guess, because the former handball champion was convicted on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion and sent to prison in 2018. Since then, Spanish prosecutors launched 3 separate investigations into the former king over allegations including corruption, money laundering, credit card fraud, and kickbacks, though all were dismissed earlier this year due to insufficient evidence, the statute of limitations, and of course the monarch's constitutional immunity. In a recent case, Seguin Wistin has sued him for using Spain's spy agency to threaten her, and in 2020 he was stripped of a Spanish stipend and went into self-exiled in the UAE. First, the great-grandmother, an imprisoned princess. Starting in 1682, Princess Sophia Dorothea of Saly married the basic B-word George of Hanover. She didn't like him, his stupid court, or the mistress that dominated his life, so in 91 she starts her own affair with Philip Christoph von, hard last name, it sounds super Scandinavian. They're naturally very stupid and their love letters get intercepted by Clara, Countess von Platen, who was Sophia's literal mistress-in-law, and Clara tells the whole royal family, who act like a mob and hire 4 dudes to kill Philip right outside of Sophia's apartment, in her line of sight. Then they took Sophia's kids away and told them to forget her existence. They imprison her at Alden House in Germany, and to save face, Sophia Dorothea is titled a duchess, allowing her to administrate over a small village, receiving dignitaries and other religious figures in her gilded cage, although she was only allowed to walk or ride on short bits of the road. It's said that the notorious hateful relationship between George I and his son George II was the cause of the disrespect towards his mother Sophia. She had died at Alden House in 1726, largely forgotten, and her legend would only resurface a few decades later due to a scandal that swirled around her great-granddaughter, Cataline Matilda of Great Britain, the sister of King George III. Now, the great-granddaughter, Queen of Tears. In 1766, at the age of 15, the daring and eccentric Catalina Matilda is married to cousin King Christian of Denmark, who suffered from being a massive insipid turd who grew up with untamed anger management and insecurities that made him into a deranged bully as an adult. Christian treated Caroline exactly how you would imagine from that description. He even delayed consummating their union for years, which is wildly unheard of. She traveled alone, no maids or family or rich folk stuff, to Denmark from England, and no one even told her he was a nutcase who would hate her. Yeah, no, by 1770 she was having her own affair with Johan Friedland Struensee, and the two lovers soon scandalized Europe by essentially taking over Denmark, issuing reforms and infuriating the nobility. Caroline Matilda was riding high, striding through the court in men's clothing, subverting the patriarchal codes of the day. In 772, Denmark's Queen Juliana Maria orchestrated a palace coup, and the increasingly tyrannical Johan is executed in April. Catalina Matilda is banished and disgraced. Her unacceptable conduct convinces her brother George that he could not welcome back this criminal sister into the English royal family. Ripped away from her children, she is sent to Celle Castle in Hanover, and like her great-grandmother, put under a sort of Gentile house arrest. Unlike her great-grandmother, she is allowed to walk through town, earning praise from commoners for her kindness and charity. Speaking of Elizabeth, for number 2, we'll talk about the snub. I don't care for royal drama, but the world knows that Diana was a gem, so Camilla can eat it. As you know, Diana was the lovely bride of Charles, the gross cheating weasel. To play devil's advocate, he always wanted Camilla and only her. The queen and other royals kept them apart, and as a result, poor Diana suffered. Once she met her tragic end, Charles went happily about doting on Camilla as per usual. And now in recent times, as we all know, he married her. That's really it. That's the scandal. Everyone hates these two so much. Their marriage alone caused fury amongst everyone, including Elizabeth, who only begrudgingly allowed Charles to finally marry Camilla. Someone Elizabeth called that wicked woman and openly stated, "I want nothing to do with her." And number 1 on the countdown, will it be Catholic or cousin? Which is worse, guys? Which would you rather marry? Well, in 2023, there's nothing wrong with marrying the first option, but you should not be considering the second. Don't do that. But George IV, Prince of Wales, decidedly married both. In 1785, George secretly married Maria Fitzherbert, a twice divorced commoner. I know. To make matters worse, she was Catholic. So not only was this match not approved, but at the time it was super illegal and technically made their marriage invalid. While courts and commoners and nobles alike berated the couple and scathingly referred to Maria as a mistress instead of their queen, these two lived happily together for a super long time. But the prince was a tad broke. He spent all his winnings lavishly, and in order to settle the debts he'd built, the parliament concocted a rather evil scheme. We'll pay it off, give you a new fortune, but you have to publicly deny being married to Maria. Well, he left her high and dry, that's to say the least. George is then set up by the same parliament with a dashing young lass, his first cousin, named Princess Caroline of Brunswick. The two were not attracted to each other, had nothing in common, nothing to talk about, didn't even like each other. A match made in heaven, obviously. They agreed to a marriage which was commenced on the 8th of April, 1795, the first day they ever meet in person. Thank you once again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want. If she'd shown mercy, perhaps she'd be spared. Death of 3. Just as you have fired, in the same way one day you too will be killed, said Swami Kapatri on the 7th of November 1966. Since 1965, millions of saints in India had started a huge movement to enact laws on cow killings and cow protection. Indira Gandhi promised to do this as a prime minister and received blessings from the Hindu saint Kapatri. She never did though. So on November 7th of 1966, Gopashtami, the most sacred day for worshipping a cow as per Hindu calendar, a huge crowd of Hindu saints and Garashkas staged a peace protest in front of Parliament to demand a ban on cow slaughter and were attacked by the police force, resulting in the death of 5,000 plus Hindus. Indira Gandhi's government deployed an estimated 5,000 buses and trucks to remove any eyewitnesses, refusing to shoulder any responsibility for the attack and blaming it on the Home Minister. This is when Karpatri, devastated, curses her to die the same way she let the Hindus die that day. True to his word, Indira Gandhi is killed by her own bodyguards, the exact same way. And now, I hope you are ready for some curses on curses on curses. Pelops, he's going to marry the princess. He offers a servant a night with her if he helps kill the king. Naturally, it's a total double cross, and once the king is dead, the servant is ordered to be executed by Pelops. So, this basic-ass servant curses Pelops' entire family and even backdates the curse to splinter reality. Tantalus questions the Olympics god's powers and kills his son, King Pelops, and feeds him to the gods while saying it's ox. The gods go, no it's not, and then he's the one cursed to stand in a puddle and he can't drink it, and then he's under the fruit he can't eat forever in the underworld, thus the word tantalize. Third generation, Pelops had 2 sons, Atreus and Thyestes, who then kill their half-bro so they don't gotta share the kingdom with them. Thyestes starts sneaking off with Atreus' wife, so Atreus cooks his sons and feeds them to Thyestes. What is with this family doing that? Atreus himself fathered 2 sons before he was killed, named Agamemnon and Menelaus. They married Clytemnestra and Helen, who gets kidnapped and causes the Troy War. On the way there, Agames talks crap about Athena, who stops the wind and strands them at sea. Only answer, Agames has to sacrifice his daughter. He does so to the horror of his wife, and the wind returns and takes them to Troy where they win the war. Orca concubine Cassandra, cursed by Apollo for not wanting to bang him, foretells his wife Clyte will smoke Agam for this, which she 100% does. Then Cassandra dies too, as foretold. Agam's son, Orestes, comes home to his sister Electra, now the 6th generation of the curse. Persuaded to avenge their father, he commits the horrible Greek crime of matricide and is so shunned by everyone he starts being tormented by fury demons. Within the day of her mother's death, she learns her betrothed took his life, so Electra does the same. Orestes is now completely alone, praying to Apollo. The god suggests, hey, take it to Athena for intervention. They put on the first trial in history in Athens. The jury voted. 5 voted guilty, 5 voted innocent. Athena broke the tie in Orestes' favor, and with that result, it seems the curse is now done. Orestes returns home to his kingdom to take his father's throne.
Number 2. Cursed craft dinner. You've got no plumbing in your palace, and it's time for dinner. So how does an Egyptian royal make his favorite pot of KD without water? I mean, if college kids can do it in their dorm room, surely they can master the art of post-secondary cuisine. Well, for some unlucky folks, it means taking a pot and walking down to that old Nile River. Almost like people rely on water or something. And take a big scoop of water and bring it back. But while you begin to scoop some water, you may notice someone is picking up crocodile dung. And people are bathing in the water. And to your left, there's a maiden washing clothes. And to your right, there's a man doing something I can't repeat on YouTube. Oh well, time to scoop some more water up and consume this clean, nice water at home. Oh, this is the best. Tastes like the village. It's nice. Number 1, pink milkshake. Does it still count as hygiene if you ain't breathing? I say yes. Besides the pyramids and maybe the Nile, mummies are the most famous things about Egypt. And in a weird way, it is hygiene. Hygiene for the afterlife. When someone super important passes on, it's time for a little game of operation. Stomach, liver, intestines are removed and put into jars. You never know when you might need that next. The heart is left because it's the heart, and the Egyptians were die-hard poets, so you got souls in there, you gotta keep that. The most grim process to me, however, is turning the human brain into a forbidden milkshake by mashing it with a small spike and then draining it out in what must have been the grossest waterfall ever. Oh god, that's so gross. Anyway, then you take some linen and start wrapping the mummy up like a dad wrapping last minute gifts on Christmas Eve. Bada bing, bada boom, there you go. Buddy is
This modern blonde is a different story, however, because she came just short of being the runaway bride. Number 6. As a wedding planner myself, I can tell y'all it's supposed to be tears of joy on your wedding day, not tears of get this bastard away from me right now, so help me God. Which was kind of the vibe that Prince Charlene of Monaco's wedding to Prince Albert II gave. Prince Albert and then Charlene Wittstock met in 2007 at the Mare Nostrum International Swimming Meet in Monaco when Charlene was an Olympic swimmer. They were engaged by 2010, but unfortunately Albert really liked having extramarital affairs. He had 2 children out of wedlock, as is, and then, per Vanity Fair to quote, days before the wedding it was reported that the future bride had attempted to flee Monaco after discovering that Albert, already the father of 2 illegitimate children, had fathered a 3rd love child during their 5-year courtship. Then the video footage of their wedding on July 1st of 2011 pops up and the bride is just bawling. Photos where she isn't, it's evident her smile is painfully forced. Post-wedding and the paternity lawsuit thrown at Albert, Charlene has gone on to insist that the wedding was the happiest day of her life and she felt absolutely zero despair. Her crying was the result of being overwhelmed. Since plenty of rumors of more affairs, potential divorce, and separate homes have arisen, nothing can be confirmed nor denied, and the couple remains married, raising twins. Here's a fun one, number 5, the Cougar Duchess. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, nobody on earth has held as many titles as the Duchess of Alba named Marie. She was known as a mover and shaker in the European social scene and regularly rubbed shoulders with everyone from royalty to Hollywood stars to ordinary people. With her striking frizzy hair, sometimes dyed red and most of the time white, Maria always displayed an eccentric, often outrageous fashion style. Throughout her 70s and 80s, she wore fishnet stockings and beaded anklets paired with loud dresses and lavish designer jackets. In other terms, she's your aunt that refuses to age, has no kids, a cool crib, and pulls up to the family function in a fur coat and leather skinnies at age 88. She was a badass. She was also married 3 times and widowed twice. What caught the public eye was that husband 1 and 2 were both younger than Maria. The second husband by 11 years, and then the husband she was married to until she died, that's the one that caused scandal. He was 25 years her junior, Alfonso Carabantes. Spanish King Juan Carlos openly labels Alfonso as a gold digger, hoping to get his hands on Maria's extensive fortune. All of 6 of her kids are horrified and do the most to try and stop the wedding. But the Duchess told Spanish radio all of her children had been divorced, so they have no right to give her lectures on morality. I don't know why my children are causing problems. We aren't hurting anyone. Alfonso doesn't want anything. He's renounced everything. He doesn't want anything but me, she said. The couple was said to have had a super happy marriage until her death 3 years later in November of 2019.
In our number 8 spot today, we have pets. As we all know very well, image is everything for the royal family, and that is down to the finest, smallest detail, including pets. It is well known that the Queen absolutely loved corgis, and how could we possibly blame her? Apparently, however, if a dog is not a corgi or a Labrador, it is socially looked down upon. Can't describe how insane that is. They're dogs. If you brought a dog who had just been rolling around in the mud everywhere with you, I could see why that wouldn't be as widely accepted among fancy social circles, but only giving the choice of a few random breeds seems kind of ridiculous. Apparently, Meghan Markle actually had to give up her beagle named Guy a few years ago before she joined the family. And then left it. I guess she can probably have whatever dog she wants now, so there's always an upside. In our number 7 spot today, we have King Charles I. Okay, this is one that goes way back and it really creeps me out. So King Charles I, right now we're on the 3rd, so we're taking it a couple back. King Charles I was tried for treason after the Civil War, and he ended up being beheaded in 1649. I guess in the 1600s everyone was beheaded, so this wasn't necessarily abnormal, which is certainly weird, but that's a history lesson for another day. The weird part of this, however, is that apparently his head was sewn back on his body so that he could sit for a portrait, or it was perhaps supposed to be a sign of respect. Either way, it's very weird and very gross. I feel terrible for whoever's job it was to do that, and I also feel bad for the artist who was forced to paint that. Talk about traumatic. It does certainly make sense though that people say that Charles' ghost still haunts a building because there is no amount of haunting that could make up for being beheaded and then having your head sewn back onto your body. Okay, why'd we do the first part if we were gonna do the second? Could've just cut the middleman, you know? But instead, they cut his head off, okay?
It followed through the lineage until it started a war. Caroline's curse. May heaven and hell blast your happiness. May your family be exterminated. May you be smitten in the person of those you love best. May your children be brought to ruin and your life wrecked. And yet may you live on lonely, unbroken, horrible grief to tremble when you recall the name of Caroline. Yikes. That's the curse placed on the Habsburgs after Caroline's son was executed for being part of the Hungarian uprising. In 1853, Habsburg Emperor had to dodge attempts on his life, but he found love with Bavarian Princess Elizabeth. They lose one daughter to illness before Elizabeth herself passes after birthing their son. Archduke Maximilian, heir to throne, is sent over to rule Mexico, where he's beheaded by Mexicans and his wife sent to an asylum. The hopes of the emperor now became centered on the crown prince, who married Belgian princess Stephanie despite being in love with Baroness Marie Vestaria. They're notoriously found dead in a hunting lodge in 1889, and it's ruled they've taken their own lives with no investigation ever done. The case is still known in Austria as the Mayerling mystery. I could keep going through generations of this curse, but I'll say it hits its crescendo with the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and we all know what happens and what started that. Next up, the prophecy as promised. Amamalama placed a curse on the Raja Wadiyar of the Mysore kingdom in the early 15th century when he came to take her husband's throne. She had fled, taking her jewels to the nearby town of Talakadu, and when the officials came to apprehend her, she spoke a 3-part curse before jumping into the Kaveri River to end her own life. The curse commanded Talakadu to become a barren expanse of sand, and for the Malagangi, a village nearby the river, to turn into an unfathomable whirlpool. And she condemned the kings of Wayadar's family to not have any children for eternity. While the events don't play out exactly as she demanded, they came eerily close. Talakadu became a desert-like place. The river near Malagangi commonly sees whirlpools, and the Wadiyar family has only birthed male children in an alternative generation, which makes it difficult for kings to have direct heirs. Historian Dr. A. Verarapa explains that if we take a scientific view, there's no scope for a curse. But if you observe the Wadiyar family tree, 6 rulers since the 17th century have been adopted sons or nephews. The Wadiyars have too acknowledged this fact. But has the curse finally been broken? In 2017, India TV reports the current ruler, himself one of these adopted sons, and his wife welcomed the first Wadiyar baby in 54 years.
Number 6. Nice dentist. Turns out not all Egyptian dentistry is completely awful. It turns out they may have come up with the first toothbrush. Other civilizations had examples of one too, so it's hard to tell exactly, but the Egyptians had one. But one thing they did have over everyone else were Tic Tacs, or breath mints actually. Honestly, this makes a lot of sense. Imagine it was Valentine's Day, you just walked past a large pyramid. There's sand in places on your body where sand just shouldn't be. When you notice the smell of your breath, and it's something awful. But not to worry, because you purchased breath mints from the market. Yes, that's right. Now smooching with your Egyptian sweetheart can go on without a hitch. The mints were made from nice smelling herbs and mints, sometimes roasted over a fire to form little candies. An ancient Egyptian solution to an ancient Egyptian problem. Kinda like that one actually, kinda nice. Could put a mint in, it's kinda nice. Number 5. What? I didn't have any corn! Austin Powers reference for you. You know the character I'm talking about, I can't say it. Here's a hygiene product that just makes me question life. The very fabric of our existence. Whether it was the Big Bang or the almighty creator, there's just no way this was ever meant to happen. It doesn't make any sense. One day, somebody was walking along the Nile River and was unfortunate enough to step in crocodile droppings. Now, most people would say gross and move on. Oh, no, not the people of ancient Egypt. They felt the stinky, squishy unholiness on their feet and said, yes, we must bathe in this. And they did. They took the forbidden mud bath, the brown tsunami, the cesspit of no hope. You can call it whatever you want, really. It's horrible either way you look at it. Supposedly, it was meant to keep you young and beautiful. My only question would be, at what point did they realize poo baths were a mistake? Was it when they were smelling it and it was bad? Or was it when it accidentally got in your mouth or something like that and you're just like, oh what, what got that out of my mouth? That's the Scottish Egyptian, in case you were wondering.
Number 4. Prince Charles and Princess Diana's divorce. Prince Charles, the oldest son of the Queen, straight up admitted to having an affair with Camilla Parker before his divorce from his first wife, of course, Princess Diana. Imagine having this is crazy. A princess? You cheated on a princess? That's insane. So in turn, Princess Diana addressed the relationship and what's happening during, that famous 1995 interview with BBC. She couldn't have said it better, if I'm being honest. Diana said herself, quote, well, there's 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. Yeah, end quote. There's no better way of putting it, I think. It's a pretty baller way of saying it. I don't know. I haven't said baller in like 13 years, but I'm like, you know what? That's a baller move. It's pretty gangster. Diana also said she was in love with riding instructor Major James Hewitt during her marriage to Charles, so everybody was busy looking other directions, it seems. Diana and Charles divorced in 1996, only 1 year before her tragic car accident. Now later in 2005, Charles ended up marrying Camilla. Has anyone seen Spencer? Kristen Stewart looked great in that movie, and now I want to watch it. Is it worth the watch? Let me know in the comments. I didn't see it go to theaters or anything. It kind of snuck by me. I was sleeping on all the good ones. Number 3, Prince Harry costume party. YouTube isn't a fan of some words, specifically one word that rhymes with Yahtzee, and it goes deep with history, as you could assume what I'm talking about. But with this being one of the biggest scandals, I have to bring it up, right? The Duke was always referred to as a bad boy, right? He was the bad royal. The bad boil royal. I don't know, I'm trying new shit here. But just how deep did these incidents cut? Well, before he settled down with Meghan in 2018, Harry had to issue a public apology back in 2005 because, whoops, somebody got photos from a costume party, and a few of them were in poor taste. Did the royal dress up as the Beast from Beauty and the Beast? No, he did not. Did he dress up like a witch? Like a little witch, maybe with a nice witch broom? No, none of that either. No, photos leaked of him wearing World War II German soldier gear. Yeah, I can't say too much, but it was even equipped with an armband, a very bad armband. Again, I can't say too much, nor will YouTube allow us to show too much, but you understand what I'm trying to say. You remember. It was poor taste. He could have dressed up in any way he wanted. He's a literal prince. And he does this? It's off-putting. Harry said afterwards, and I quote, "I am very sorry if I caused any offense or embarrassment to anyone. It was a poor choice of costume and I apologize." End quote. Nice. Right from the heart. That's good. Really goes deep with the royal history. We love it.
A royal family that says, hey, leave the dog out of this. Thailand had a pre-existing law that if you insult the members of the royal family in any kind of way, keep in mind it's the royals themselves that get to decide if you offended them, so you could really get in trouble for just like picking your nose near them. It could land you in prison. Each of the offenses is 15 years in prison too. And that trash talk can be in person, in writing, graffiti, or social media. Cue my example from 2015, a man named Thanakorn was charged by a military court for making a sarcastic internet post about Tong Dang, aka Copper, the much-loved street dog that had been rescued by the king himself from an alley. In fact, she's so praised for her loyalty and obedience, Tong Dang is a household name. The king wrote and illustrated a book about her in 2002, and an animated film in 2015 called Kong Tai Dong, an inspiration, was second in the box office that year. And this regular everyday dude, Thanakorn, understandably rolls his eyes hardcore and let the jokes fly in a social media post about said movie. I guess he didn't realize the dog counted as a royal family member, and he went to prison for 3 months. But others have gone to prison for decades as the injured magistrate convictions have surged since Thailand's arch-royalist generals seized power from the elected government in May of 2014. One man was jailed this year for 30 years for insulting monarchy on Facebook. Now for the legal obligation to be taken to the grave. Working for the pharaoh could be pretty lit as long as it wasn't forced captivity. If you were hired staff for arts, music, foods, hygiene, whatever, you'd be paid spectacularly, housed and fed well. Overall, you had a good go of it. Until there comes a day where every pharaoh gets mauled by a hippo and has to take a dust nap. Because of their strong belief in the afterlife, Egyptians were dedicated to ensuring that they carried the things they would need into said afterlife. Tools, cooking utensils, makeup, a brush, a long narrow glass glass bottle filled with buzzing bees. I see you, Cleopatra. In the case of pharaohs, who were considered to be the most important people alive, they required their workers, enslaved or contracted, in their afterlife if they were to continue living lives of comfort and luxury even after death. Many other individuals of high rank in ancient Egypt who had staffing would also often be buried with their workers, the same as pharaohs, treated as if they were moving into a new house with their masters. And this was the rules. You were a servant, you were expected to go quietly, willingly. Hell, they wanted you to be so excited you practically threw yourself in the tomb and begged them to bury you in. Before any of the pharaohs that are the most famous today came into power, however, the tradition underwent a change. Obviously, burying people in there is pretty cruel, and after a while people got real sick of having to die when the pharaoh does. However, the pharaoh still requires servants in the afterlife to perform various menial tasks for them and maintain their palace. This led to the introduction of shabti, tiny carved figures that were placed within the tombs of the pharaohs. They're shaped like small mummies, and each of them had special details carved into them on what jobs and tasks they would have in the afterlife.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Ferdinand I, the King of Naples from 1458 to 1494. Ferdinand was looked on quite fairly as a leader, but he was also known for being quite a ruthless leader in a lot of aspects as well. He was 35 years old when he came into power, and in 1485 he was faced with a revolt among the nobility. Ferdinand quickly put a stop to this, but promised the nobility a general amnesty before later turning against them and executing a number of them. For the most significant offenders against Ferdinand, however, he had quite a specific treatment for them. After their slaying, the king would have these enemies embalmed, dressed, and then posed in his quote black museum. This seems like a weird hobby you probably would want to keep hidden, but not Ferdinand. He loved it and was so proud of it. He would even take his guests on a tour of the place if he suspected that they may be treacherous. In our number 7 spot today, we have Louis XIV. During the reign of Louis XIV, poison was one of those things you just really had to worry about. It was on the rise as an easy and sneaky way to take people out and change the course of inheritance and influence. Because of the worries surrounding possible poisonings and stories of people close to the king doing some shady stuff, investigations began. It was soon found out that the king's chief mistress, the Marquis de Montespan, was said to be quite the client of Catherine Monvoisin. Catherine was a Parisian salesperson who sold powders and potions that were meant to catch the attention of the king. You know, love potion stuff. But among these love potion stories were also stories of horrifying rituals and rites of practice in order to get these alleged powers. These stories, of course, terrified the king, and this led to him ordering for Catherine to be burned at the stake, and not only this, but hundreds of others were implicated as well. Some passed from the conditions they were being held under, others were executed, and some saw punishments that spared their lives, but their reputations were forever tarnished. For the chief mistress, however, well, although she was connected to this entire ordeal, she was the mother of several of the king's children, and because of this close connection to the king, she wasn't arrested or tried. Instead, though, she was retired and sent to a convent to live the rest of her life. In our number 6 spot today, we have never travel in pairs. This is one travel rule that certainly makes sense, but it is really dark when you think about it. This rule is one that the British royal family, and honestly many people who can afford this sort of luxury safety, do nowadays. This tradition and rule is one that means that any heirs to the throne are not allowed to travel together. This is of course in case some sort of accident happens. Not every heir to the throne would be injured or perhaps killed. It's definitely very smart and sensible, but it has got to be grim, just constantly preparing for the worst thing to happen. It is of the utmost importance to the royal family that they preserve the line to the throne. Like I mentioned before, however, other people are now taking a page out of the royal book and are using this travel rule where possible. In our number 5 spot today, we have the black outfit. Another travel rule that the royal family must follow is in regards to an item that they have to bring with them on all trips, whether business or pleasure. It is pretty unusual to see the royal family dressed in black, despite when a specific occasion calls for it, but every time they travel, they're required to bring an all-black outfit with them. This is to prepare for the worst case scenario. If they are away on a trip and somebody important to them passes away, they need to ensure that they are ready with the appropriate clothing for when they're able to touch down on their home soil. This is of course very practical, but it's definitely kind of morbid. I mean, you're having to fuss over what you're gonna wear when you're actually just mourning the loss of someone close to you. It certainly wouldn't be the top of my list of things to focus on, but maybe that's why I'm not cut out for royalty. Okay.
Not so British after all. If you're like me, then you're most likely not gonna be royalty. Although being a prince would be pretty cool, I just don't have the pure bloodline to be royalty, but neither does the Queen of England. When you think of old Blighty and her royal throne, you think of pure British descent, but you'd be wrong. The House of Windsor is actually Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which, if you couldn't tell, doesn't exactly scream tea and crumpets. The German-sounding name became an issue in the early 20th century due to the First World War breaking out against two-time war loser Germany, Britain needing to inspire its citizens to defeat Germany, which at the time it was really anyone's game, so to help inspire the people, King George V changed the name to Windsor. After all, it's kinda difficult to fight someone when you have more in common than differences, not to mention that there were a lot of Germanic influences around, so really, it was a bad look and a great marketing decision.
At number 9, Charles the Tampon? Yeah, we're getting weird. Relationships are kind of weird. I mean, they can be great, don't get me wrong, but they have a weird side too. Every couple is different and they have their thing. Some have a show that they like to watch together, others have their songs, and some have little sayings that they've come up with. But those are the more tame quirks that some couples have. Others, however, can get very bizarre, but many of them probably can't add up to the strange things that have been said between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles. As we all know, Prince Charles was first married to Princess Diana, and it's no secret that they had a pretty tough relationship. Theirs was certainly not a happy marriage, and they each had their own affairs with other people while they were married. During their marriage, Charles was still pretty hung up on Camilla, the woman he was told he couldn't have, and who was also married to someone else. This minor obstacle, however, didn't stop them from getting freaky, at least over the phone. In 1992, the year that Charles and Diana announced their separation, a steamy phone conversation between Charles and Camilla was leaked, and it was super weird. In the call, Charles was simping like no other, saying things like how he wished he could live in Camilla's pants as a pair of panties, and even expressed his desire to be Camilla's tampon. Like, what? Charles, stop it. Ew. This leak became a scandal called Tampon Gate, and as you can imagine, this wasn't good for the royals. But I guess it still kind of worked out for Charles, since after all that he finally got the girl he wanted and perhaps got to live out his dream of being a box of Tampax or something. I don't know. I really don't want that mental image. Move.